I stood there with mud on my boots and a shovel in my hand when I saw a woman in a coral pink blazer stomping across my pasture, like she owned the place. Behind her were two men in polos carrying measuring tape, one already stepping on my irrigation lines. "You're trespassing," I said calmly, pointing toward the weather-beaten wooden sign nailed to a fence post that read "Private Property since 1946. She squinted at me with the smugness of someone about to recite a rehearsed speech. "Actually," she snapped, "you're in violation of Community Ordinance Section 9 and we're reclaiming this land for the Woodland Heights Beautification Project." That's when I raised my hand, gestured at her, and muttered the words that triggered the showdown of my life. "Lady, this is a cattle farm and you just stepped in fresh manure." She didn't even flinch. She stepped closer, pulled a document from her handbag, and smacked it into my chest like it was some royal decree. I looked down. Eviction notice in 3 days. It didn't even make sense at first. I'd lived here my entire life. My parents were married, under the walnut tree near the north fence, and my grandfather built the original house with his own hands. How could some neighborhood board full of cocktail-drinking lawn obsessives just decide it was theirs now? But they had it all laid out in slick legalese, some obscure zoning loophole tied to a development expansion, and they were claiming my farm had technically fallen within HOA boundaries. Karen Thistled, president of the Woodland Heights HOA, was apparently leading the charge with all the grace of a steamroller on fire. I took the notice and walked back to my porch where my dog Hank growled low as she passed him. She flinched, scowled, and muttered something about unleashed animals. The paper said I had 72 hours to comply or be fined $500 a day. They accused me of having unauthorized fencing, non-compliant landscaping, and unapproved agricultural storage, which I assume meant the barn my grandfather built before HOA committees even existed. I sat down with the notice in one hand and a beer in the other, staring out at the fields, watching my cows chew cud while a woman who's probably never cleaned a rake tried to erase my entire history. The next morning, they were back, this time with a crew. They pulled up in branded trucks with HLA logos and started staking out markers like it was a subdivision project. A young guy with a clipboard walked straight into my corn row and started placing orange flags. I marched out with a copy of my land deed in hand and asked what in God's name he thought he was doing. "Surveying," he said. "For what?" I asked. "Perimeter beautification," he replied without a shred of irony. I laughed because what else do you do when someone threatens to decorate you off your own property? Then came the real kicker. Around noon, I noticed one of the workers trying to mount a decorative lattice fence. Trouble was, he picked the wrong side of the pasture where my electric fence lines run to keep in the heifers. I shouted, but it was too late. His drill made contact with the wire and the loudest zapping pop you've ever heard lit up the afternoon. He leapt back, screaming, tossing his drill like it was a snake. No serious harm done, just a good jolt. But Karen saw her opportunity. She stormed over with a voice shrill enough to startle the birds from the silo. "That was deliberate," she barked. "You assaulted my crew." I tried not to laugh. "Ma'am," I said, "that's an electric fence. There are signs. You walked past 3. She didn't care. She pulled out her phone, threatened to call the sheriff, the city planner, and her cousin who worked in real estate law. She said I was impeding community development and that criminal charges might be filed. I knew I needed backup, so I made a call. Just one. 30 minutes later, a dust trail appeared on the gravel road leading to my farm. A dark green Ford truck with government plates rolled up and stopped just short of the pasture. Out stepped my younger brother Nate. He'd just gotten back from 2 weeks on base and still had his uniform on. Military police patch shining, sunglasses low on his nose. Karen's face shifted from rage to confusion as he approached. "Is there a problem here?" he asked in a tone that made everyone freeze. Karen cleared her throat. "This is a private civil matter. You can't." Nate held up his ID. "Ma'am, I am a federal military police officer on authorized leave. I have full authority to assist in matters involving unlawful trespassing and veteran property rights under the 2008 Rural Protection Act." That was mostly true. Nate knew the law better than she did, and he sure knew how to deliver it like a boot to the chest. Karen's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to argue but forgot the words. The clipboard guy shrank behind the truck. The workers started packing their tools. I just leaned on my shovel and smiled. Karen, though, wasn't done yet. "This isn't over," she hissed. Nate smiled politely. "Then I suggest you bring a lawyer and a badge next time. Otherwise, this farm isn't going anywhere, and neither are you." She stomped off in a cloud of dust, humiliated, but I knew she'd be back. HOA Karens don't just quit. They regroup, reload, and come back with clipboards full of petty revenge. But now she'd made it personal. And worse, she'd dragged it into the spotlight. What she didn't realize yet was that my farm wasn't just land. It was legacy. It was sweat, soil, and sacrifice. And she had just walked into a battle she didn't even begin to understand. I wasn't just defending property. I was defending home. And she just declared war on a soldier's brother. She stomped off in a cloud of dust, humiliated, but I knew she'd be back. HOA Karens don't just quit. They regroup, reload, and come back with clipboards full of petty revenge. But now she'd made it personal. And worse, she'd dragged it into the spotlight. What she didn't realize yet was that my farm wasn't just land. It was legacy. It was sweat, soil, and sacrifice. And she had just walked into a battle she didn't even begin to understand. I wasn't just defending property. I was defending home. And she just declared war on a soldier's brother. The silence after Karen drove off didn't last long. My phone exploded. Missed calls, texts from unknown numbers, emails ranging from, "You better get in line," to, "I hope your cows get repossessed." I laughed at first, thinking it was just more empty threats. But when I opened the Woodland Heights Community Facebook group, one I'd never joined, I saw a pinned post by Karen. A heavily edited photo of my pasture with words in Comic Sans. "Unauthorized use of land discovered. Local farmer defies beautification order." The comments were a cesspool of keyboard warriors praising her for standing up to rural freeloaders. What followed was worse. Someone dumped a pile of old roofing, shingles at my driveway entrance, not just trash, clearly meant to block access. Then, overnight, 4 identical signs popped up along the edge of my land. Future site of Woodland Heights Community Garden under HOA oversight. I ripped one out, snapped the plastic, tossed it in the compost. The nerve of claiming they were taking my family's farm for decorative rosemary and overwatered tomatoes was beyond infuriating. Nate was furious. He came back that evening after filing a preliminary report with his base commander. He couldn't do much officially yet, but he wasn't letting this slide. "This is targeted harassment," he said, pacing my kitchen. "They're creating a false narrative and weaponizing social media. We've seen this before, overseas and online. It always starts with disinformation." I raised an eyebrow. "So what now?" He grinned. "Now we play back." Word spread fast among the old-timers in town. The guys from the feed store stopped by with donuts and 2 fresh rolls of no trespassing tape. My buddy Lucas offered his drone to capture footage of any more unauthorized activity. By the weekend, someone, definitely not me, put up a billboard near the HOA clubhouse with a cartoon cow trampling a lawnmower. Farm first, HOA later. The real surprise came from the bakery. Old Mrs. Fennigan, who ran the place forever, put a chalkboard sign in her window, now selling HOA tears, salted and frosted. Inside were sugar cookies shaped like little houses with frowny faces. It became a sensation. People came from 2 counties over just for selfies and a bite of sarcastic solidarity. Karen, of course, was livid. Her next move was more calculated. She filed a formal complaint with the county, citing me for unauthorized utility infrastructure, my well, the barn's generator, even my windmill. The notice arrived 2 days later. Scheduled inspection next week. They even hinted my livestock operation could be shut down if safety standards weren't met. Nate didn't wait. He made 2 calls. Within 48 hours, a decorated Army engineer showed up at my gate. Captain Drew. Full camo. Boots that looked like they'd marched through 5 countries. "Heard you've got an HOA problem," he said with a grin. Captain Drew ran a full inspection. Barn, wiring, well rig, feed storage. Documented everything with military precision. "If your barn's wiring is unsafe," he told me with a wink, then so is half the U.S. Army's Logistics Corps. He issued a signed, stamped statement on letterhead certifying the farm systems exceeded military-grade standards. I couldn't wait to frame that one. Meanwhile, the HOA wasn't backing off. Karen posted another inflammatory update online, accusing me of violating wildlife protection zones and alleging my cows were destroying native plant habitats. The absurdity was almost funny if it weren't so dangerous. That night, a neighbor I barely knew knocked on my door. Ron, quiet man from 3 blocks into the HOA development. He looked over his shoulder before